I'm Carl Drummond, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at IPFW, and it's my pleasure to make an announcement, sort of a paired announcement. The first is that we're in the second of our planned events associated with the University Community Conversation Program, UC2. This is a year-long series of events sponsored by the University and the College of Arts and Sciences to stimulate conversation within the community about a topic of interest, and this year's topic is the promise and problems of democracy. Our next event on the schedule is a community book read, and the book that's been chosen is On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. That's available in a number of free outlets, as well as through local booksellers and our local libraries. In early April, we will have a public forum with a group of folks from the community and IPFW faculty to discuss this book, and so we invite the public to get a copy online or a hard copy and read along. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce the speaker for tonight's program, Paul Helmke. He's president of the Brady Campaign and the Brady Center to Prevent Gun Violence. He's former mayor of Fort Wayne, as everyone I'm sure is aware. And the title of this evening's presentation is Tragedy in Tucson, Impact on Gun Legislation and the Accessibility of Elected Officials. Paul, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. I'm not announcing that I'm running for anything, so it's you get to early February though in an election year, it just sort of you get the urge sometimes. It was what 24 years ago I did that the first time. But thank you, Carl and Indiana Purdue for inviting me to be a part of this. I am just thrilled to be able to have gotten back here last night. DC does not know how to clear snow, and they don't know how to clear it, they don't know how to drive in it, they don't know how to walk in it, but they were fine yesterday. They were 50 degrees. It was getting through Cincinnati and getting in here that I wasn't sure about, and luckily there was a window of opportunity, and the roads looked great, and it was fine to get out here. And I don't want to steal all my speech from tonight, but basically I do want to talk about the fact that our refusal in this country to try almost anything to regulate guns and to deal with the issue of gun violence has been leading not only to unnecessary deaths and injuries. About 100,000 people every year in this country are either killed or injured with guns, but is now starting to disrupt our political system and our political discussions in this country. And the tragedy in Tucson, I think, showed what effect that can have on elected officials, on those who deal with elected officials from the community, and also points out just how weak our laws are. The shooter in Tucson didn't break a single law until he pulled the trigger the first time and put the first bullet in the Congresswoman's brain. And that shows that it's not just one of these simplistic, oh, let's just enforce the laws on the books. He was too dangerous for his algebra class in his college. But that's not enough to put him on the prohibited purchaser list. He was somebody who was too unreliable for the military. That's not enough to keep him from buying a gun. It's easy, so easy, to buy a gun in this country. He was able to buy a gun even though his classmates thought he was very dangerous, even though the bank tellers would reach for the panic button whenever he walked into their lobby. He was able to buy a gun in this country, and we allow him in this country to buy a gun with a 30-round ammunition magazine. That's something that people don't use to hunt with, that people don't use for personal protection, that police departments, including the one in Fort Wayne, don't use on a regular basis because 30-round magazines don't fit into the holster and they throw off your stance. But entirely legal in this country. Didn't used to be. From 94 to 2004, those were banned. But because we don't like to regulate guns or even what goes into guns, now totally legal for him to get those bullets off. And in Arizona, totally legal for him to take that gun, buy the gun, take that gun, get that ammunition magazine, and carry it without a permit on the streets of Tucson. So didn't break a single law until I pulled the trigger the first time. And if people argue that the answer to this is less gun laws, go to Arizona, because they really don't have any gun laws in Arizona. If the answer to this is more guns in Arizona, everybody basically can take a gun around. But he wasn't stopped by somebody else with a gun. He wasn't stopped by a quick response from the police department, even though it was a quick response, and even though there were people with a gun that responded quickly. He was stopped when that magazine ran out of bullets. by brave people who stopped him. And if that magazine had run out of bullets after 10 rounds instead of after 30 rounds, that's 20 less bullets that would have been fired in that 15-second period, and that's less people that would have been injured. This affects the public discourse. Anytime you're in the public life, you realize that, that you're going to make people angry. First thing I learned as mayor is somebody's always going to be angry. My first month in office, I had death threats, and you respond to that. My older daughter, who's my son-in-law, her husband is now in Iraq, and she's worried about that. But today she said, you know, should she be worried for me today, going and give a speech tonight? And I'm not worried, but it's the sort of thing that, you know, when you're a mayor, when you're in public life, when you deal with controversial issues, and you realize that there are people out there that aren't always the most stable, that don't always behave the right way, that can easily get high-powered weaponry, it's something that does concern you. And that's something I think we need to talk about in terms of how does that affect public life. I've met Congresswoman Giffords when she first ran for office. I talked to her about the gun issue. She owns guns, supports the Second Amendment. She also believes in reasonable restrictions. And so that shooting affected me directly. It affected me when I thought about Jim and Sarah Brady, who were named after. Jim Brady, 30 years ago, March, got a bullet in the brain too, at a public event with a public official. In that event, they were surrounded by Secret Service. Having more guns around didn't help them in that situation. That came home. But just the fact that when I was mayor, I was used to going to events like this, having mayor's night out, doing neighborhood walks, being accessible, talking to people that were protesting things. And I think we really need to talk about how can we really carry on the sort of democracy we want, the sort of political system we want, if all of a sudden people are afraid and further separated from the people they represent. One of the things we need to look at are the gun laws in this country. Actually, there aren't many to look at, so it's going to be easy. We need to talk about why we allow this level of gun violence in this country. So I invite you to the speech tonight, and happy to take any questions you've got now.